Welcome back to My Dad Saved the World. Today's post is that of one of a sadder note. A few days ago, Kansas City Chiefs linebacker Javon Belcher shot and killed his girlfriend just before taking his own life in front of his general manager and head coach. After reading a piece today by Kevin Powell that really kind of talked about the inner struggles of manhood, especially amongst black culture, I really started to ask myself, what's really going on with us as black men? What are we really teaching our sons what manhood is? How are we teaching our sons on how to deal with emotions? What are we doing to teach our sons how to deal with failure? How to win? How to succeed? And are we teaching them that a man is a man that doesn't show emotion? That when he does show emotion, it's typically anger, that he bottles everything else in? Are we teaching our kids that when you don't know what to do, you resort to violence? No, I'm not saying that Javon was taught those lessons growing up. Like Javon, I also grew up in a single-parent household. And unfortunately, I did not know how to resolve conflict without emotions getting over me. But the question I ask myself today is, what are we teaching our men? What are we teaching our young boys? It's time that we teach our young men that you can work through conflicts, that you can talk, that you can reason, that when you have emotion, that there are ways to get that emotion out. When you're stressed, there are ways to relieve that stress that won't cause anybody else harm. The black man growing up, I oftentimes was taught that if I'm hurt, never show emotion. That if I'm angry, to get them back. And I do not think that that is what we should teach our boys anymore. We can see that right now, this lack of emotional intelligence is doing nothing but putting kids in body bags and men in prison. So I make the pledge today to teach my son how to properly handle his anger, how to understand what failure is and what failure is about, and that failure is not about losing but getting up. How to properly teach my son that when there is a conflict, to resolve it through communication at all cost. I pledge to teach my son that if for some reason he does feel the need to be violent, that it is not the answer. And I challenge you, dads, those of us that grew up in not the most ideal situations, it's time for us to do better. It's time for us to teach our children that conflict resolution can come from conversation. It's time to teach them that if they are angry, to talk it out. If they're hurt, to tell somebody. If somebody's hurt them, not to take it into their own hands and to attack. But most importantly, it's time to teach our children how to deal with, understand, and cope with our emotions, and how to communicate. I think a lot of these problems that we deal with typically stem from the lack of understanding emotions that teaches young black men that when you're angry, retaliate or attack to get even. That teaches young black men that if you think something's wrong, to keep your mouth shut. Let's use this as a teaching moment. It is unfortunate, however, that 2 people had to die for us to start a conversation about young black men and their emotional intelligence, and young black men and mental health. But let's not just make this a conversation. Let's make this a movement of action. Let's do better. Pledge with me to teach our young black boys how to handle emotion, how to resolve conflict through conversation. But let this lesson not just be one for the newspapers and for the media sources, but let it be one for us as black men to unite and do better.